Hey guys, how's it going? Nick here, and we have finally made it through the month of October. So I figured I would just go through all the movies and TV shows that I've watched during the month of October. There's a lot that I don't get to talk about, movies that I watch on my free time that I don't review in that. So I figured I would probably do this at the end of every month. So starting off real quick with the TV shows, I don't watch very much TV at all, so I'll get those out of the way. I've watched obviously the first 4 episodes of Creepshow. 3 of them I reviewed. Part 4 is in Editing Bay. Episode 4, you'll get that very soon. And I will continue through the season 1 of that show. I've also checked out Chucky, the brand new TV series. I've only got to see episode 1 so far. Episodes only released once a week. I think there's only 2, maybe 3 out at this point, so I have lots of time to catch up. But so far it's amazing. Like, I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. The trailers look good and everything, but actually watching it, and especially after Cult and Seed and that, when we get something like this, I'm very satisfied, and I'm interested to see how everything's going to connect, because this is supposed to be leading right after the movies, right? This is a continuation, and with the first episode we didn't get to see too much of that continuation, but I'm sure they explain it later in the season. And 2 other shows that I've been watching lately is Married with Children and Third Rock from the Sun. Both 2 awesome sitcoms that you can throw on anytime and enjoy them. Now getting into the movies that I've watched in October. These are in no order, by the way. I just watched these all in October. First one I got is 13 Fanboy. That is Deborah Voorhees' new film that is really interesting. It takes place... It's very meta. It's like in the real world of all the Friday the 13th actors and other horror alumni. And these actors and actresses are getting stalked by these fans. And one of them is going around and killing them all off like a slasher. Which is really meta because, the actors from the movie are playing themselves being killed off. I thought it was really cool. Pretty low budget though, but overall a great film. I've also watched Godzilla 2000. Now there's 36 Godzilla movies and Godzilla versus movies. I've seen the one from the 90s, the shitty one that the States made back in the day. I don't remember too much about it except for it being like a giant iguana or some shit, giant lizard. And I've seen Godzilla versus Kong, like the old one from the 50s. I've watched that one before. But I haven't dove into this franchise too much, but I have picked up the Toho Collection Volume 2, which has 7 movies on it. And this is the first one I checked out, Godzilla 2000, and it was decent. I did think that the problem with the film is that there's not enough Godzilla, even though I guess he doesn't have a huge appearance in any of the films, like for screen time. But this one I felt like he was at the very start and the end, and the middle we barely seen him at all, which was kind of odd. But overall, great characters, cool little story, and has some sci-fi stuff in there, like he's against like this alien that comes to Earth. And yeah, it was just really interesting. I checked out Escape Room 2. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of the first one. I thought it was mediocre at best, but it was okay. So I didn't have real high expectations for this one. And that's pretty much how I walked out of it after watching it. It's an okay sequel to an okay film. Nothing special. It's not something I'd be running out to buy when it comes out on Blu-ray or whatever. But it was decent enough. I think a step down from the first film. Hereditary is another one I watched this month. This movie, this is probably the 2nd or 3rd time I've seen it. It's just so heavy. Like, it really hits you with the tragedies. The whole film is pretty... I don't want to say depressing, but it's just such a downer, the whole film. You're like... It's not a fun film to watch, that's for sure. But it's really well made. Great performances and a really cool little story to it. Next up, we got the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. My favorite in the franchise. This is a go-to every October. It's easily the best film out of the big 3 in my opinion. And just an all-around great original piece that started a franchise that couldn't quite stick the landing after Dream Warriors. Since it's October, I've watched mostly all the Halloweens. I watched 10 out of 12 of them. so I'm not going to be going through every single one. I did a tier ranking on the franchise just the other day if you want to go check it out. But I'll just say this, the original is almost practically a masterpiece. Part 2 is a great follow-up sequel that's a little more on the Friday 13th side of slashers than the atmosphere in that. It's more about the kills in the second one, in my opinion. We got Part 3, which is totally different from anything else in this franchise, but it's a neat little Halloween film. We got Part 4, which is another pretty good sequel with a great ending twist that I wish they would have followed up on. Part 5 doesn't do that. Part 5 is a pretty shitty sequel in this franchise, even though it pretty much checks all the boxes, but like the least amount possible, if that makes any sense. We got Halloween 6, Curse of Michael Myers. A lot of people hate this one. I love the brutality of it. Story-wise, it's messy, but it's still a great film to put on in October. We got, what's next? I didn't watch H2O or Resurrection this time around because I watched it a few months back. We got the 2 Rob Zombie films. They're fairly unpleasant to watch at times, but they're really well made. It's just the dialogue is so shitty in the first one, and then the second one fixes the dialogue for the most part, but then we have a bunch of ghost shit in that I do not enjoy. And then after that we got Halloween 2018, another great follow-up to the original. Not as good as some people make it out to believe. Like, it's not the greatest sequel in the franchise or anything. It's probably the slickest looking, but not story-wise. But it's okay. And lastly, we got Halloween Kills, which is somewhat of a disappointment. It's not a bad film. It just feels like a filler for the middle of your trilogy. Not much happens aside from Myers going around killing everybody in his path, going from point A to point B. That's basically the end of the film. Oh, we got A Night to Remember, which is a Titanic film back in the 50s, I believe. And this is a great adaptation of the real-life tragedy. If you're not into all the romantic stuff in James Cameron's Titanic movie, I highly suggest you check out this one because it follows more the crew members and such. Next up, we got Deep Rising. Now, this one was suggested to me from Killer Flicks. A few people suggested it to me, and it was a pretty good flick about these people about to rob or do like a heist on a luxury cruise ship. But when they get there, everybody's already dead or missing because another group of creatures had already boarded the ship themselves. So it was a real interesting plot line to that one. We got Night of the Living Dead, a classic if there ever was one. I've reviewed this early in October. Just a great zombie film that pretty much started it all. We got The Guest, which was a first time watch for me. A very cool little modern horror flick. More of a thriller, I'd say, but definitely has some horror elements in there. And surprisingly enough, it does a pretty good job at the whole Halloween atmosphere. Here's another classic, Poltergeist. I'm not super into paranormal type movies or hauntings or ghost stories, but this one is one of the better ones and definitely is worth checking out. Next up we got Hellfest. This is one that I hated when it came out, and I'm glad I rewatched it this October because on second viewing I was a little more easy on it. It's still fairly, I wouldn't say mixed bag. I think it's passable, like a 6 out of 10 or so, which is much better than what I previously would have gave this, but it's okay, it's decent. Great atmosphere. You got the whole carnival setting in that and everybody wearing the costumes. It's just that the kills in that leave a little to be desired, and so does the whole final act. But overall, it's an okay flick. We got Trick or Treat. This is one I watch every single October, a lot of times on Halloween night itself. And yeah, it's an anthology movie with 5 stories, all interwoven, and it's done excellently. It's one of my favorite anthologies, if not my favorite anthology, and it definitely gets you in the Halloween mood. Over on House of the Living Dead's channel, we've been doing watch parties to the Resident Evil franchise, me and Chris Snyder. So far we went through the OG, the original Resident Evil, which I love, and I don't care who knows it. 9.5 out of 10 for me. The first movie I've ever reviewed on my channel. Don't watch it though. It's terrible. I was very bad at reviewing back then, and I'm only mediocre now. Part 2 is a great follow-up. Not as good as the first in my opinion, but it does a lot more for the fans of the video games. And Extinction Part 3 is like the Mad Max version of it, where everything's in like the desert in that, and it's a pretty cool environment. And to me, it's the last worthy sequel in the franchise. Also, on the J-Man's Movie Cave, Jason Nike's channel, I was over there and we did a watch party to Psycho 2, which is, I think, the best horror sequel ever made, in my opinion. It's up there, like, especially from a 1960 movie to 1980s, and to make a sequel that has this much connective tissue, you know, everything feels like a perfect follow-up. It doesn't feel forced. And the way that they used Norman's trauma in that, and tried to push him back to the man he was, is just such an interesting concept. Next up, we got Trick. This was another first-time watch for me this month, and I thought it was okay. Jamie Kennedy, we got who else? We got Tom Atkins, who did a kick-ass job as always, even as an old man. But as a slasher, I thought it was just okay. It didn't stand out that much to me. It was fairly mediocre. But I'll revisit it again sometime in the future, and hopefully I enjoy it even more. Another watch party over on the Wolfman's channel, Mega Movie Z, or Mega Movies with a Z at the end, I should say. We did a watch party for Curse of Chucky. Now, this is one of the better sequels in the Child's Play franchise. I like how it goes back to the darker tone and the more seriousness instead of the comedy that we got in Seed of Chucky. Here's one I watched just really recently, the movie Old, the new M. Night Shyamalan film. And I thought that this one gets a really bad rep when it came out. The reviews in that I was seeing, mostly negative. This film I thought was very good. I thought it was an interesting concept, you know, going to a beach that ages you really quickly, like in one day you can go through your whole life cycle. And I just liked all the themes and in like the family, how they should cherish their moments that they have together, and all different things. And the twist at the end was really clever, I thought. Not Shyamalan's best movie or anything, but a very solid, like 7 out of 10 easily. And lastly, I got the movie Haunt. Now, this was a rewatch for me. I thought it was pretty good the first time I watched it. I think it was excellent the second time I watched it, even though I got cut off halfway through watching it on Halloween night because the power went out. But aside from that, I finished it up the next day when I could. And yeah, a very solid haunted attraction type place. Almost like Hellfest, but done a lot better, more serious and violent and brutal. And it's definitely not a light-hearted horror movie. So there you have it, guys. That was everything I've watched in October, all my October watches. I thought I'd share that with you. I'll be back at the end of November, beginning of December, with the same thing with all my November watches. And I just like to do this, like I said, because there's so many movies that I watch and I kind of forget about. So I'm going to start writing them down when I watch them, and so I won't forget. Because I could have had more movies from October that I just don't remember watching, or TV shows. And it's unfortunate because I didn't write anything down till last minute. But that should be changed next time. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and hope you got a few suggestions out of there as well. And until next time, thanks for watching.